free speech suppression? Well, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly approved regulations that would allow the temporary shutdown of foreign news channels on the grounds of national security, as the country's communications minister, Shlomo Karhi, is seeking to shut down Al Jazeera's bureau. Writer on Substack, Caitlin Johnstone, wrote on X, "Why is Israel censoring news reporting about its actions? Is it because it's doing good things and telling the truth about its activities?"
Meanwhile, climate activist Greta Thunberg posted on X on Friday, "Today we strike in solidarity with Palestine and Gaza. The world needs to speak up and call for an immediate ceasefire, justice and freedom for Palestinians and all civilians affected." An Israel Defense Forces spokesperson said that whoever identifies with Greta in any way in the future, in my view, is a terror supporter.
Robby, we're in a zone where a teenage climate activist saying that she wants to have a ceasefire gets you called a terrorist supporter by IDF spokespeople. Has something jumped the shark here in the messaging that's coming out of Israel in the wake of the October 7th crisis?
Did you see the aspect of this involving the stuffed octopus?
I did.
Stuffed animal octopus?
Want to fill in the audience in case they missed that, Jim, over the weekend?
Sure. So in the photo, she had an octopus stuffed animal that I guess there were claims that could be interpreted as anti-Semitic. I have no idea if that's true or not. That I have no knowledge that speaks to that. Greta responded that she apologized and I think redid the photo, but
cropped it, I think,
left out. And she said it was to help with her autism, but she was sorry for the anti-Semitism.
Yeah, so it certainly is. I mean, I don't fault anybody for not being super aware of it, because I don't think it's a trope that is used very widely today. But the octopus, specifically a blue octopus with its tentacles wrapped around the earth, is an anti-Semitic symbol you can see in lots of cartoons from an earlier era. But the stuffed toy that Greta Thunberg had is a very common toy that's used in like the autism community. I've seen it all over the place on TikTok and the like. And the point of the toy is you can turn it inside out and it changes color and has a happy face, or you turn it the other way and it has a frowny face. You can see the original photo here on the screen now, and with the octopus on her shoulder. And Greta Thunberg, I think, is someone who's openly talked about being on the spectrum. And these toys are supposed to help people who have a hard time explaining their emotions or letting people know how they feel. Have like an external representation of their internal state. So it did feel to be a kind of a very bad faith reading. And in fact, people on the internet quickly found an image of Mike Pence talking at an event with a very sad event with only a handful of people at it, but with a shelf full of similar toys right behind him. So it does seem like a nothing burger, but the escalation in rhetoric from Israel seems to be notable. Go ahead.
It reminded me actually of what I think are almost always bad faith efforts by mainstream and liberal people to tar contrarian or conservative people as being anti-Semitic by, the oh, look, isn't that the okay sign? Oh, look, isn't that tattoo the Nazi cross? No, it actually isn't. If you remember that whole news cycle where this woman who was a supposed expert, Talia something or other,
Lavin, I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, got that wrong. And if you remember the Gina Carano, who was a actress who was on The Mandalorian, the Star Wars, as she's now, I think, mostly doing stuff for the Daily Wire. She had shared that one of those, the elites taking over kind of images that is anti-Semitic. Like if you're very knowledgeable about, again, if you have expertise on anti-Semitic tropes, you would have recognized this as having anti-Semitic undertones, but probably no normal person would have. So I think there have been a lot of efforts that you often targeted actually at conservatives to make them sound anti-Semitic. This was very similar to that. The bigger deal, though, obviously, is the banning of media outlets by the Israeli government. This is something that that our close U.S. ally and defender of Western liberalism, Volodymyr Zelensky, did as well in Ukraine with the banning of opposition media, opposition political parties. And yet we are trying to say, the U.S. has been trying to say that it is important for Western U.S.-aligned liberal values to win the day in conflicts like the Ukraine-Russia conflict, even as our allies violate the free speech norms that we consider totally sacred in this country. So obviously, I think it's terrible. Just on its face, it's a bad thing to do. No matter how desperate the military or the war situation is, you don't suspend civil liberties because there's a crisis. You should cherish them and hold on to them dearly, even if there is a crisis. But it also speaks to what are we even doing here? I think.
Yeah, I mean, it gets even worse. It's difficult to frankly cover all of the abridgments of free speech that have been pursued by either the Israeli government or its proxies, I shouldn't say its proxies, but people who are sympathetic to its kind of political interests right now, both within Israel, where there have been a lot of domestic protests that have been suppressed, and in other countries around the world. Instagram is now apologizing for its role in some of this censorship. This is an interesting story. What has happened apparently is that the Instagram was adding the word terrorist to some users' bios in what's been called a translation error. One user had written in his bio that he was Palestinian, and it was followed by a Palestinian flag and the word alhamdulillah, which in Arabic translates to praise be to God. However, when clicking see translation, viewers were giving an English translation reading, praise be to God, Palestinian terrorists are fighting for their freedom.
Well, this user said in his post he was not Palestinian himself, but had tested the error out after being told about it from a friend who is Palestinian. I obviously that was wrong. I don't know. It's maybe there was some person at the company at Meta who thought it would be funny to do that, or is very anti-Palestinian in his views or something. Obviously, I don't think that was a deliberate policy on Meta's part, frankly. But I can't really guess what went wrong there. It sounds like human error, but perhaps it wasn't, I guess, if we're being maximally charitable, but probably someone did that.
Yeah, well, someone obviously did it. The question is why it is that there seems to be this trend. We covered last week, some stories about Palestinian journalists who allegedly had been pulled from their hosting spots at MSNBC, Ali Velshi, Mehdi Hassan, and the like. There was a story about Palestinians or Arab Americans in the newsroom who tried to articulate any kind of questioning about whether or not there should be a ceasefire and the like, who were criticized roundly for it. There was a story about a prominent agent at CAA who was, it seems, pressured to resign for making some pretty benign statements on the internet. I'll pull up that story in a second after we continue this read. But it is notable that pro-Palestinian protester speech is facing crackdown in Europe as well following recent demonstrations. And journalist Glenn Greenwald tweeted, it takes a deeply authoritarian mindset to demand this. Protests aligned with the war policies of the UK government, and this pundit who was tweeting, i.e. pro-Israel protests, are legal and permitted. Protests with dissonant, from their view, pro-Palestinian protests should be legally banned. That does seem to be the trend that's emerging here, no?
Yeah, it's very troublesome. We've had Michael Schellenberger on a couple times, and Glenn Greenwald himself to document what's going on in Europe, where there are unfortunately not the robust protections of the First Amendment don't exist. We find it disturbing when it happens, but it does happen. The UK government, the German government, the French government do crack down on free speech and are absolutely doing that in this case. And again, it makes me thankful that we do have the First Amendment in the U.S., even if it isn't a perfect shield, and government actors sometimes find ways to violate it. But yeah, it's very worrisome. I mean, they're cracking down on dissent. They're trying to eliminate contrary perspectives. And if you thought this was a problem during COVID or during any other major kind of political issue that's come up in the last few years, or the same issue going back to the war on terror, the immediate post 9/11 landscape, where actually, despite us having the First Amendment, the U.S. speedily approved the Patriot Act that flagrantly violates and continues to this day to violate people's free speech rights, due process rights, their rights to privacy, their rights to travel unhampered by government bureaucrats filling you up all the time. It's really bad, and I unfortunately bet we're only beginning to see all the kind of bad policies coming into fruition.
I totally agree that the government pressure is the most significant here, but it is also worth knowing there's a lot of group pressure. We talked at length about the Harvard students that were being pressured by a truck with a screen on the back with their names on him. You had professors from Berkeley, I believe, a professor writing into the Wall Street Journal saying, do not hire my law students because they are anti-Semitic. And the story that I was referencing earlier was of the CAA agent. Her name is Maha Dakil. She resigned from the board after what was described in Variety as controversial media posts. The media post in question was, you're currently learning who supports genocide. That's the line for me. What's more heartbreaking than witnessing genocide? Now, I think a lot of us have, and a lot of international humanitarian organizations have described the ongoing, 5,000 people, 1,700 kids that have been killed in Gaza, and the choice to evacuate the top half of the Gaza Strip as something that is akin to ethnic cleansing, forced migration, genocide. These are terms that are being widely used in very professional environments. And the idea that someone might be forced to resign from their job because in their personal capacity, they tweeted out frustration, anger about an ongoing humanitarian crisis is something I think that anybody who has interest in free speech in the United States of America should keep their eye on.
Yeah, I think, based on the conversations you and I are having, I think the best way to deal with these issues which people disagree on passionately is to just let them actually express their views and to disagree and to try to find common ground. But obviously, if someone is saying something about this conflict that you disagree with, you have every right to express that. But I do think, like you, I think it's unhealthy for society to have everyone being in the position of having to lose their employment or their status as a student or something based on expressing ideas that are controversial for some. Obviously you don't have a right to that job or that position, or if you're a Harvard student, you have some hard free speech protections in your right as a student based on your contractual arrangement with Harvard University, which they pay money to attend. They don't have a right to a future job with a law firm or anything else. But it's not I don't think it's a healthy thing. And Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, expressed this very well. One of the Republican candidates who's been kind of a dissenter a little bit on some of these topics, in saying that it's not healthy to go down this road. It is clearly an embrace of cancel culture to treat people like this over disagreements, and you should want to persuade, not punish, wherever possible.
Yeah, I mean, one last kind of glaring one that got a lot of attention over the weekend. I do think some of the statements that are coming specifically out of Israel's official Twitter page are rather remarkable. The United Nations UN Geneva account tweeted 4 words: even war has rules. Speaking to some of the war crimes that we've described as happening in Gaza right now. And the Israel account quote tweeted that and wrote, even Israelis deserve to live. Now, I don't think that's in dispute, but the choice to respond to an articulation of the Geneva Conventions, which is to say you can conduct a war, but you have to follow some basic humanitarian rules. The idea that Israel's official account will respond to that, saying, Well, there's apparently some conflict between Israel having a right to defend itself and respecting the Geneva Convention. That's a little bit of a weird tell on behalf of the Israeli government. And I don't know what's going on with this Twitter page, if it's off on a lark, but this kind of repeated trend is also drawing a lot of attention, and I think reflecting some of what Glenn Greenwald described as authoritarian leanings here. So we'll continue to cover all of these free speech developments as they emerge. Please do stick around for more Rising after this.